No, Todd, not now!
Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 778. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we're going to review the Australian Grand Prix review. As always, we do this. You know how, I think this is how we do this, typically.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
Exactly. That's how we do this. Before doing that, I have to introduce my co-host tonight, which of course means...
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, how are you doing?
Yeah, feeling pretty good, Todd.
I bet you are.
Yeah,
I bet you are.
Not so shabby.
Yeah, I bet you're really excited because, ladies and gentlemen, if you did not know, the Heart of Racing, the team that Paul is the sporting manager for in the IMSA series, won the race in their class in Long Beach. Number one. Paul, that's got to be awesome feeling. I know it's been a tough start to the season. A couple difficult ones, Daytona, Sebring, two very tough starts. To go to Long Beach and bring it home and with a win is great. And it's gutting because the other car, the sister car, in my humble opinion, was absolutely heading for a second class win, a 1-1. But I had that incident with 30 minutes ago. That's gutting, but at least you got the win.
Yes. It was a weird sensation, with 30 minutes to go. We got one car in first place, the other car's in second, hunting down first place. And I'm like, oh, does a girl dare to dream, and evidently not, because there was a little contact there when Maxime was trying to get by the BMW, and unfortunately it did enough damage that the car then didn't have any steering left and collided with another wall, and his day was done. But it could have been so easily 1-1, which would have been sensational and very difficult. As we know, the series is super competitive, so to actually have the opportunity to be in that position, is something you dreamed about before the season started. But and it was right there. And Long Beach, sensational event. I love Long Beach, and obviously we're a big Formula One fan, and I remember reading my auto sports as a kid, in the mid 70s, looking at those pictures of, the Formula One cars going up and down the hill, and, at Long Beach, we're there. It's not part of the actual circuit design nowadays, but I always stayed ingrained in my brain. And we were doing our track walk, and Calvin Fish was walking along with us, who does a lot of the commentary for US racing nowadays. And I was telling him, do you remember, we're seeing the Ligiers coming up and down that hill. And as I said, it's always been ingrained. So Long Beach is always a bit special, even before I even came here. But the Long Beach Grand Prix is massive fans, Californians. They just come in their droves to this event. So it's great to be a part of that, and to come away with the win was it was super joyful, So
that's
it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, how tough is that track?
It's definitely unique and tough. Obviously street circuits are always tough. There's not a lot envelope for different interpretations of a corner. You got to get through it. You got to stay off the walls. But the key here is you got to be able to get off the corners and get that traction down. Really important is to get the dampers and the suspension tuned right, that you can ride over those fairly aggressive curbs, and you have to drive across the curbs. You've got to cut that corner across the curbs to get any kind of lap time. You cannot avoid them, so you've got to make the car work over that, which leads to you have to soften the suspension, make the dampers work right going over the curbs. But then also there's regular corners too. You've got to get the downforce right and the settings right as well. So doing that, getting that compromise going is difficult, and you don't get a lot of time. You get 2 practice sessions, then you're in qualifying. So you really got to do your sums before you get there as well.
Brutal. Well, it's an awesome win for Harder Racing, and
Thank you.
I I stole your picture that you posted of you with the trophy, and I
Yeah.
tweeted that out on our Twitter account. You holding the winner's trophy. It was a great image, great picture, and yeah. So if all of you out there are looking for a team to cheer for, obviously we're biased, but the Heart of
Yeah.
Racing is a great team. Aston Martin cars look terrific, and yeah, tough start, come back with a win, start to build some momentum, and let's hope.
Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
next race for you guys?
Next race is Laguna Seca. So
Laguna. The
yeah, another
corkscrew.
classic, right? The corkscrew, another
Yes.
classic race, right? It
Yeah,
just doesn't stop really.
yeah, I know.
One great
Yeah.
track after the next, really.
No,
Yeah.
that's a cool thing about IMSA. It is. It's just one great, American track after the other, and
Yeah.
and they're all good, that they race at. Those
Yeah.
tracks.
We even
are terrific.
go back to Canada this year finally. So
Are you going to Mosport?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, great track. That's awesome. Well, I
Yes.
know all the Formula One fans out there are going,
Get to the show!
This is the show.
this is the show, folks. This is, we can celebrate Paul's victories whenever we want, and we should. So,
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, Paul, in between this weekend, did you happen to squeeze in the Formula One race from down under the great southern land that is Australia after 2 years absence, putting 145,000 people there on Sunday, 400,000, over 400,000 in aggregate over the weekend? I would say our Aussie friends were ready to get out.
Yeah, we were ready to see them too, weren't
Yeah,
they?
we
I mean,
were.
they obviously were the first of the shutdown, and it's been a start-stop thing trying to get this race in. Finally, it got green lighted and went through, and everyone came in to, it was a what electric kind of atmosphere there, which
Yeah.
it usually is anyway, but even more so maybe this time.
Yeah, it's interesting, I thought, Paul, to see the teams try to get on top of this, heavily reprofiled circuit now, and resurfaced circuit. And it seemed like, initial sort of narrative out of Friday practice, Saturday morning practice was, maybe some graining issues on Friday that they thought they were getting on this circuit. Didn't quite seem to appear as evident on Sunday, although there was some graining, but maybe not as much. I don't know, as it was earlier in the weekend, but it seemed, you could say, well, it's track bedding in and that kind of thing. It could be, it was new track surface, reprofiled to be much faster. I think, it was around 150 miles an hour average lap time. But it did kind of seem that the teams kind of struggle with that setup from Friday and then into Sunday. It seemed like maybe they were on the back foot with this reprofiled track surface and the tire wear they were kind of dealing with.
Yeah. Well, they've got a lot of things they're still learning, right? I mean, it's not just that they're coming to Australia with their previous car. They're coming with a new tire, with a new rule package, and then they're coming to a new Australian Grand Prix that they don't have any data of anymore. It's one thing, as I always say, when I get to a racetrack, if I know the car or I know the track, then you can get up to speed pretty quick. But when you go to a new track in a new car, that's different.
Yeah.
And this is basically, they've gone to a new track. They have some data, obviously, definitely with a new car and with a whole different rules package. So we're going to see a lot of this as the year goes on till we get to maybe mid-season when everything starts to settle down. They really get to understand these cars and how they work during the race weekend better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, I was kind of anticipating we'd see track-specific performance gains across the field. Some tracks will flatter some teams more than others, and vice versa. I still think we're going to see that. I agree with you, Paul. The one thing, though, that we have seen, and people who are longtime listeners know I'm a Ferrari fan. I have been my whole life. So I'm not saying this out of a sense of bias. I'm just saying this, that we've seen 3 different races now, Paul, on 3 different types of tracks, 3 different track surfaces. And one wonders if it is time to suggest that Ferrari are the clear team to beat in 2022. It seems to be the full package: reliability, well-balanced, fast in qualifying, but equally fast and long-run race pace. Do you think they've, after 3 races, this is a fair assessment?
I think that is a fair assessment. And I think, they were unlucky not to maybe win all 3 races at this point. And, I think Max and Red Bull were punching above their weight just a little bit where their car actually is in comparison to actually, pull a win out. But I think they definitely got everything right. And a good car is a good car, usually works well everywhere. I think we'll probably see a point, where one of the other two, whether it be Red Bull or Mercedes, do get one over on the Ferrari. But right now, I think the margin is pretty, in Formula One standards, pretty large. That even if they're not quite on the button, they've still got a little bit in hand that the other teams can't get to yet.
Yeah. There were a couple of key moments or talking points that I made notes of. The first one was the decision to add a 4th DRS zone, and then that was scuttled at the last minute in favor of 3. I think Alonso was heavily involved in those discussions. And it was interesting because there was an interview with Pat Simmons at F1 who said that it was unfortunate because they did away with the 4th, because what they intended to do was to use 2 zones to catch up to the leading cars, and then 2 zones to actually make the pass. So tactically, when they laid the DRS zones out and the length of the zones and the detection points, that was their intent.
Right.
It's DRS.
I don't. Yes, DRS. I'm not going to get too deep into but as we said last time, it was like, if you're going to have DRS zones, then have them everywhere so that everyone does get the chance, if they get past, to be able to repass. I don't think that if he's putting it that way, then I think that's wrong. You don't put 4 DRS zones so someone can then catch up over one half a lap of the track and then finally be able to make the pass at the end of the second half of the lap. I would want 4 zones so you could repass, rather than it takes 4 zones to actually make a pass. And I don't think as the race wore on that it was necessary. Maybe you took away the cat and mouse thing we've seen in the past couple of races, so it was a bit more.
Maybe it did,
true,
but we ended up
think.
Out of the 3, Paul. We had 2 detection. We had 2 DRS zones and 1 detection point.
Yeah, that's what I don't like. I don't like the 1 detection, 2 DRS. I think. I don't
because
like that at all.
In those cases, you have just throwing out examples. So let's say it's Lewis in another car, and so Lewis, let's say he gets passed. So you go over the detection zone, and the car is within a second, and then you get to the first DRS, you get to pass. And because there's another car in front, then, it doesn't have to be. You get to pass Lewis, but then the second zone, you get to use DRS again. Right. You get to pull away, right? So,
and it's supposed to emulate slipstreaming. And I don't get me wrong, but I believe technically you can't slipstream ahead of somebody.
Yeah, right.
So it's really adding the fakeness to it, because if you use the first DRS zone to catch up and you're still behind, and then you detect again and then you make the pass, then I guess that's what they want. But definitely I'm vehemently against DRS in general, but definitely you shouldn't be ahead, make the pass, and then be able to pull away.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else did I have? Clearly, Red Bull were struggling with issues throughout the weekend, and particularly with Max's car. He was never really comfortable in the car, while Perez seemed happier with his, ultimately leading to...
Do you like my bass? You like it?
Yes, Sergio, we do. I got to think that some of that's just down to... I'm kind of thinking that the way they went with the setup on Max's car, they were struggling with some issues we'll get into later, but I'm kind of thinking that this car has more understeer this weekend anyway, and maybe in general that Sergio can manage, that Max typically likes a more pointy car and a little loose, and I'm wondering if that's not kind of the reason Sergio is sort of coming to life this year.
Yeah, it could be. I thought the Red Bull's actually kind of pointy when we were seeing it in preseason, etc. I thought that was kind of its advantage. Maybe at this track, it didn't go that way. Maybe they're trimming it out so much to get straight line speed or whatever it is, that that part of the car is not kind of coming to a fore at this kind of track. Obviously, they smoothed out the curves. It was a pretty fast track. There wasn't a lot of stop and start to it, so definitely needed a car that could do well at the top end, and so yeah, maybe just the setup that had to happen here to make the car fast didn't suit Max's style. He likes to attack, and there wasn't that many of those types of turns here anymore. They've definitely smoothed those edges off.
Right. Yeah, and as we mentioned, there are track-specific performance gains that teams will get. But at first blush, I was watching this weekend, I was wondering, coming out of Friday and looking at their pace, and then on Saturday, I was thinking, wait a minute, have McLaren, they may have made a bit of a performance jump here by curing maybe some of their braking issues they were having, given their pace on Friday and Saturday. So much so that I was kind of curious to see if they had potentially leapfrogged Mercedes, given the struggle that Mercedes. As it turns out, I was dead wrong. Mercedes still had the pace over McLaren, but coming out of Friday, that's what I'm saying. Out of Friday and Saturday was one story. Sunday seemed to be a different.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely there wasn't much deg or anything with the tires by the time Sunday came around. So obviously, as we saw with Albon, if there was any issues there, that could never have happened. So McLaren have made a big jump in a very quick time. Mercedes aren't as abysmal either right now. So both those teams are making gains. They just started from pretty far back, a lot further back than they were ready for. So we'll see. But I think they both should be happy with their progress, but I still think they've still got a big issue that they need to solve to have a chance of winning a race.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's talk about the races that finished. We'll start with Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, P1, Carlos Sainz, DNF. Charles had a good start, stayed ahead of Max, and then proceeded to pull out a considerable gap until the virtual safety car and eventual safety car periods. There were 2 safety car restarts, and the second one was the one that saw some real pressure. Charles made a little bit of a mistake on the restart. Max put some serious pressure on him, but Charles managed to hold him off, stay in the lead, then pulled out another considerable gap to take the win, the first Grand Slam, if you will, for Ferrari since 2010. And it was interesting to me, Paul, to see the considerable amount of porpoising that the Ferrari still has down the straights. But when they enter the braking zone, it just instantly goes away, and
settles down,
and it disappears rather quickly, and they can turn in with a lot of good speed, hold that downforce, manage those turns far better than the Mercedes or other cars that are porpoising as much. I'm not sure what kind of wizardry is involved in that and black magic, but it is pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, I can't tell you how they're doing it or how they're making it work. Everyone's obviously still dealing with the porpoising issue and balance, etc. But if you can, maybe it looks a bit worse than it actually is in the vehicle, perhaps. But if you can get the car on the brakes and get it settled down, then obviously they've figured out a way of, once the car's in the retardation stage, that it really is planted and not liable to keep bouncing around, etc. It's more a aero imbalance rather than everything not working together in sync.
Yeah, and this wasn't just Charles sort of eking out a win like he did, or like close run thing like it was in Saudi Arabia, and him this time eking out the win. This was dominant. I mean, lots of pace in hand, managing his tires, managing his gap, managing the race. Just Red Bull had no answer for him. Yeah. So a great drive from him, and a guy who, quite honestly, he's all in. I mean, he's driving incredibly well.
He's driving great. I mean, I think he always was driving great. It's what are you fighting with? I mean, I remember hearing on the commentary, it's like, oh, he's learned how to lead from the front and how to manage a race. I'm not so sure he never could. He just didn't have the tool to show that skill off. I mean, with the first 2 years, he was in a learning phase. But I think, when Vettel came to the team and, he showed what skills he has in racecraft and in speed. And now he's able to use a car he's got a little bit ahead of everybody and be able to calm down a little bit. And at that point, it nearly makes you faster. Right?
Yeah, right. So it's good for Carlos. He got caught out by the red flag during qualifying. And this was an absolute spiral. It just got bigger and bigger all the weekend long. This red flag caught him out from setting that fast lap. He looked on pace, looked as quick as Charles did. And this left him starting back in ninth. So the team tried a different strategy with him, started him on the hard compounds. Unfortunately, he got a bad start, lost a few positions, then tossed it off the island into the sand and beached it for a DNF. With cold tires.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, Paul. It's just an unfortunate sort of circumstance that started on Saturday and snowballed into Sunday. And now, unfortunately, he's in a very tough situation for him. And one, quite honestly, you and I talked about when he first announced he was going to Ferrari. You and I talked about it. I was worried about this. I spoke about it on the podcast when he signed for Ferrari. If he doesn't start winning quickly, he is going to be relegated to wingman position, and Ferrari have no bones about doing that. They will prioritize they will prioritize Leclerc really quickly. And so Carlos, I'm not even sure if it isn't too late to not be prioritized,
Yeah, I think he's going to have to be very lucky, or Charles is going to have to be unlucky to put him back in that window of some kind of equal footing on strategy. Because right now, when was the last time Ferrari won a world championship?
Yeah. Let's see, it's 07, wasn't it?
So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
From what I remember. So they're not going to let anything go away in order to be fair. Yeah. They need to do everything they can to give Charles as big a cushion. You don't know when Mercedes or Red Bull are really coming. So you need to remember when the Brawn days, right? They started off with an advantage, but soon enough, things turned around and they were not dominating or even winning anymore, and they squeaked it through to win the championship by the end just by staying competitive, even though they weren't competitive enough to win anymore. So they need to score as much as they can while they have the advantage, and they need to call it. They do actually need to call it right now because of that, because they do not know what those other teams are going to have in hand as they go along. And Carlos has put himself in that position. Unfortunately, he was a little bit behind. Not far at all, but just being behind inevitably starts everyone making those thoughts and decisions. And after that weekend, and how much of a lead Charles has, certainly over his second rival and over Sainz, I think Ferrari have to make that decision right now and make hay while the sun shines, while Charles has that advantage. And Carlos is just going to have to suck it up, I'm afraid.
Yeah, he ain't going to like it.
No.
And this is why after the first and second race, he was being so negative, so down. And everybody's like, well, you were on the podium. You were in third place. And I was like, that's not, see, but Carlos knows. He knows. He works for that team. He knows that he had to perform. And the pressure is so high at Ferrari that right now could be his season pretty much done. And he could be relegated to the Bottas role at this point already,
Yeah.
And it's gonna. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I think the world of Carlos. I think he's awesome, but I just know Ferrari, and having followed it, and so I think you're right.
I don't know what happened to him. I mean, obviously we know what happened. He was in his mind. I'm sure he was, panicking a little bit, especially when he was moving backwards after the start. It's one thing to start ninth, another thing to end lap 14th. Yeah. There was some serious issues with tire prep on that car, on that hard tire, because other people started on hard tire. They didn't have as big an issue on getting up to speed. So he didn't get the tires prepared properly. And when you're starting ninth, you're being gobbled up by everybody. And so he went back, he got a bad start. He didn't get the car up, tires working. So he kept falling further and further back, and he just held that steering wheel too tight and made the outside move, ran out in where he shouldn't, the place of no return, basically, in that left-hander, and got beached. And that's the end. That's the big mistake, right? And as you said, it's going to pay against him for the rest of the season, probably at this point.
Yeah. And watch that space, because, some drivers will not like it, but they'll kind of go into that role. Think Perez last year. Think Bottas for 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
8 years, or whatever it has been.
Yeah.
Barrichello. Some drivers will fall into that role. They're not happy about it, but they understand. Other drivers don't handle it well. Think Alonso at McLaren, Lewis at McLaren when they were teammates. Some drivers don't like being put in that box, and it doesn't bode well. And it'll be interesting to see, how Carlos handles it. So watch this space. It could be, some intra-team friction there. We'll see. Red Bull. Sergio Perez, P2, Verstappen, Max Verstappen, DNF. Perez had a good start, got balked behind his teammate, allowing Hamilton to get past him, but he did get back around the Mercedes. During the pit stops, George Russell benefited from a safety car box, which is a free stop, and got around Sergio. He had to pass George. Sergio's race was basically spent passing Mercedes instead of fighting Ferraris, right? Yeah. And having the reliability and performance as well as tire management to finish second after Max retired, which is kind of a hallmark of Sergio. So he did have reliability. He managed his tires well, came home in second place, did a good job to get back around those Mercedes. But I have to think, Paul, at this point, that's not exactly what Red Bull thought they would be doing. They thought they'd be fighting Ferraris, not defending from Mercedes.
Yeah, and that just shows you how important those starts are, right? I mean, he fell back one spot. If he'd have gone through turn one behind Max, I'm sure he would have stayed in contact. And when Max fell out, he would have been a lot closer to the Ferrari. But fighting with the Mercedes constantly through the races, putting back and back and back, it was obvious the car was faster than Mercedes, but you still doesn't mean they're just going to wave you by. They're going to fight tooth and nail, which they did. So every time you're stuck behind a car that's a little slower than you, the cars in front are just pulling away, and there was nothing he could do about it. But I think they were fortuitous for him to actually come out with as many points as he did, quite honestly.
No, it was a good, if he had to pick up the baton and run with it, he did. So it was good. Max was running comfortably in second, but didn't have the pace to reel in Charles. Unfortunately, Max did make a decent effort, like I mentioned, at that second safety car restart, but fell back, lacking the pace to keep the pressure on until the team told him to stop with an engine issue that is suggested that was some sort of fuel leak, some sort of fuel issue. They already had some other issue, whether it was hydraulic or some issue before the race. Max was concerned about even making it through the race, and the team were, frantically kind of working on the car before they grilled it up in the formation lap. But I don't know if this is true, but I've read today that there was some sort of fuel, maybe a fuel line issue or something. And who knows, because if you remember on the team radio, the team told him to pull over, and make sure you stop somewhere where there's a fire marshal or a marshal with a fire extinguisher.
Right.
Suggesting that it probably could be fuel, and the team knew it,
Yeah, and he was desperately looking for something too. Yeah, I mean, obviously got all these sensors on the car, and they know if there's some kind of leak because there's something be high pressure is what the sensor's sending out. Something low pressure, which kind of signifies that the fuel's going somewhere else other than where it should be going. So that's how they detect those things. It's surprising. The Honda engine from last year is now the Red Bull. You wouldn't have thought there was going to be a lot of technical issues. There shouldn't be a lot of changes. Realistically, you're expecting that the Red Bull engine team are just kind of carrying on where the Honda left off and not having to redesign everything. But maybe with the redesign with the new rules has had to make them do some things quite different than they had last year. So they're having to get their heads around that and adapt to it.
It's a good point. Yeah. It's a good point you raised, Paul, because, if this was just the engine from last year, they didn't have these issues. Right. So now that they're sort of in control of the Red Bull powertrain department, they're still have former Honda people working there. What changed, right? Why are they having to manage heat problems? What would have changed, in the regulations that had made them change the engine. One would argue that perhaps it was done for performance gains, and hopefully they have that. But as it stands now, Max is, really on his back foot. He 2 DNFs in 3 races has put him behind the 8 ball, and to recover is going to be really tough without some sort of attrition from Ferrari, who doesn't really show any signs of reliability issues as of yet.
Correct. Yeah. We haven't seen the engine let go. It's been all the auxiliary issues, right? So for me, it feels like it's something to do with the packaging.
Yeah.
Where with the redesign, the new rules, they've had to repackage. They got obviously the lump sits in there normal, but everything else is probably quite different than last year, to make use of the ground effects and move things around and make things as quick as they can. And maybe there's some issues there that they didn't have enough time to work through, and they're finding the little gremlins as they go along.
Maybe instead of that fuel line being straight, they had to use one of those, like a straw, the curly straws,
Yeah, or a couple of elbows. Oh, we got this. We're about 8 inches off. We'll just put a little bendy piece in here. We'll be fine.
Somebody give me some plumber's tape. So it didn't quite work. All right, let's talk about Mercedes, shall we? Oh, yeah. Get down. So Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton in P4, George Russell in P3. Lewis had a good start, jumped Perez, then spent the day battling the Mexican for position. He was unable to hold Sergio off, and then lost another position to his teammate, who benefited from that free stop under the safety car. Lewis said the team put him in a difficult position, and I didn't know what he meant there, and then he kind of walked that statement back with some sort of words. It was like a word salad, he put together there, and it's something about overheating the engine, and then he couldn't push and couldn't, so anyway, I'm not quite sure what the intent was there, but he actually looked good during qualifying, and then come the race, I thought, let's be honest, he was wringing the neck of that car, trying to get it up there, and it had some decent pace given the deficit that they're down. The best I can tell, I was reading an article by the veteran Mark Hughes, a great guy, great F1 journalist, and he kind of laid out where he thought the deficit was, and I kind of tend to agree with him. I read that article, and it did make sense. They're somewhere between 6 and 8 tenths off a lap, and I think they still are, And I think maybe Red Bull's issues this weekend sort of, as Mark put it, sort of made Mercedes look better than they really are.
Right. Considering where they are to Ferrari, they're just as far back as they were the other last 2 races. It's just, Red Bull came back to them a little bit is what they're trying to say, right?
Yeah,
so it's probably true. They got one Ferrari wasn't up there at the beginning, so that helps. And then you've just got the 2 Red Bulls, and so I don't know if I think they're better, but they've still got a fundamental piece of a puzzle that they haven't found the solution for. They're looking around the floor. Is it the one that looks like the giraffe? No, that's not it. Has it got yellow on it? No.
Right. Well, and it is, you've got the engine issues, right? You had Aston Martin, you got heat issues, Williams and Mercedes, and even the Mercedes team, trying to keep the engines cool, like Red Bull, AlphaTauri has several engine issues, it just makes you wonder what's going on there. And, and I don't think it's just one thing. And I think that's what Lewis is calling for. He was, look, he's saying we really need to fix this and fix it like right now, meaning he knows, Red Bull, they've stubbed their toe, 2 DNFs in 3 races. Max is down considering the points. You have George Russell second in the Drivers' Championship, and you have Mercedes second in the Constructors. So if you're Lewis, you're saying, guys, I know you're working your tails off, but we really, really need to fix this because right now we're in the catbird seat of trying to take the battle to Ferrari.
Right. They've been lucky to be in that position. They haven't earned it technically. It's come like a little present in their hands, and it's probably right. And they're there not through where they are actually in the competition level right now. They're definitely third and a little bit way back in third. So damage limitation, as they always say. And but no time to expect those presents to continue to be sent to you.
Yeah, right. And Lewis knows that. He's been around a long time. He knows this is a brief window to capitalize on attrition and reliability, issues, and they're doing it. But now they got to accelerate that. George Lucky Bunny, having benefited from that free stop during the safety car period, allowing him to jump up to fourth, then third with Max's retirement. As with all F1 races, some benefit from the safety car and some lose every time one is deployed. And this time it was George's turn to benefit, and the podium. He made it on the podium. That moved him into second place in the Drivers' Championship, if you can believe it. You have to think George is going to be all over the team to cure their ills by Imola, and keep his second place battle with the leader, Charles Leclerc. But I suspect if they do cure their ills by Imola, Lewis will absolutely have an answer. So.
Yeah, I mean they're both great drivers, and if they have the answer, then they'll both be fighting.
Oh yeah,
for those positions. But yeah, I'm sure when George joined Mercedes, he probably maybe even expected to be second in championship at this point, but didn't expect who was ahead of him and who was behind him. Yeah.
Right. He probably thought he'd be second, but behind Lewis. Yeah. McLaren, Lando Norris P5, Dan Ricciardo P6. Lando didn't have the best of starts, came back through the battled the Mercedes quite a bit. They were really hoping they could try to stay ahead of the Mercedes ultimately, and they just didn't have the pace in the end to fight with the Mercedes. But he did manage to keep the local boy, Daniel Ricciardo, behind him and came home in fifth. He said that's about as good as they could do.
I would say it's as good as they could do and a lot better than we expected.
Yeah.
Once again, they've turned it around. They've made quite a big gain considering how terrible they were.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the year, and although it's still the beginning of the year, and doing it remotely. They're solving these issues while they're riding on planes and putting things on boats. So
right.
I think, maybe they did know what the fix was, and I think the fix is coming on for them. I think they're a lot closer to solving their issues than Mercedes are, actually.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Yeah. Dan scored his first points of the season in front of a adoring crowd, but didn't have the pace to challenge Lando for fifth, so he struggled on the hard compounds during the second stint, and then they kind of came back to him a little bit towards the end, but finished in P6. And, the crowd was elated to see Dan, and lots of energy around Daniel Ricciardo. So not a bad weekend for him.
Yeah. Who doesn't like Daniel Ricciardo,
Who doesn't?
He's a good guy. He was right on the tail of Lando, so that's helpful. Even if he's not ahead of him, at least he's not out of the ballpark and getting lapped by him or what, there's not a big gap, and Lando isn't head and shoulders above. So I think important for Ricciardo to catch up, and now next thing is to stop beating them again.
That's right, and he kept the Alpines off the back of him.
Get off now.
Right, got that going for him.
Yep.
So that's good. Yeah. So Dan,
Netflix are real buttons, aren't they?
Yes, Dan, they are. All right, let's talk about Alpine. Fernando Alonso P17, Esteban Ocon P7. Alonso started on the hard compound, and he was running long. So he didn't box under the first safety car period because that would have been way too many laps for his medium tires, right? So his strategy was pretty much cemented at that part. Couldn't box during that first one. He was running really well up in the order. He looked like in qualifying, oh my gosh, he was putting down a fantastic run on Saturday, but running well up in the order. When he did stop, though, he lost a lot of ground and a fistful of positions. He stopped again late, which dropped him down to 17th. It's a real shame, Paul, because, he was putting in an incredible lap on Saturday when the gearbox wouldn't change and put him in the wall. Mm-hmm. And then he gets to the race and just got hung up by the safety car. Didn't help his strategy. Ends up down at 17th. I clearly think he would have been 7th, 8th place.
Yeah, still not where he wants to be, mind you.
No.
But I think the strategy killed him more than anything, right? The hard tire strategy. Maybe he should have done what Albon did and just stay out there forever.
Yeah.
Once you did a second stop, that's pretty much the nail in the coffin at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Must have been an issue to have to do that.
Yeah. Ocon boxed before the safety car, lost ground, but he did manage to come back through and score decent points. That's For Esteban folks, that's 3 races and 3 points scoring results for Esteban. So that's not all bad. I'm not quite sure if this track flattered the Alpine a little bit, or if they're making genuine gains. Time will tell, but they did seem to be a little resurgent here.
Yeah, time will tell. Yeah, with these guys, where are they?
I know.
And I think we've been asking this question for like 3 years. Where are they actually? Are they? Sometimes they're hot, sometimes they're cold. For a team of that ilk, they need to be in the McLaren pace every week. And they're not. And sometimes they are, obviously. But the consistency of Alpine is always in question. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Agreed. Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, and P8, Joe Guan Yu P11. So Bottas missed Q3 for the first time in over 100 races. But he had some great battles on track, to be fair to Valtteri, and always in the hunt for points. Climbed his way back up into the top 10, finished 8th. So, not a bad race for him. And to be honest with you, while there wasn't a lot going on at the sharp end of this race, there's a lot of great midfield battles, and many of them at the hands of Valtteri Bottas. So good race for him.
Yeah. Now he got a bad start, right? He dropped back a few spots.
Yeah.
So I think that Alfa Romeo is pretty handy, and I think Bottas is doing a pretty darn good job in it, really.
Yeah.
Not known for his street fighting skills, but to come back as far as bad a start as it was, and to come back, and he definitely was fighting. There really wasn't anywhere forward to go from there, really, with the McLarens just up ahead, right? So, and the Alpine, I guess, maybe was probably definitely doable for him if he hadn't put himself on the back foot so early in the race.
Right.
I think that, and then this track, not super easy to pass on. So, I think they're going to have better races than this, even, once they get out in the open and in a track where you can really ring the car lap after lap.
Yeah. Joe had a decent race going once again, and on the last lap, he saw Albon came out right in front of him. And so he tried to make the move on Alex, but couldn't get around him because Alex had, he's freshly shot tires with new tires, and Alex ends up in P10. But look, hey, in 3 races, P11th is Joe's worst finish this year. I mean, so this young man is doing a terrific job. And, I'm eating crow because I was wondering, well, why wouldn't Alfa just call it Mick Schumacher, and instead of taking Joe and a pay and drive and all that. But he's doing a great job, Paul.
No, he is. He's not doing we haven't seen him do anything silly yet. And we've seen him have to make passes and get them done and work in traffic and qualify well and race well. And you wouldn't. If you're Alpha, you couldn't ask for more than how he's performed so far. We saw with Yuki, came in with a bit more higher trumpets raising with Yuki's, but I think Joe, one of the next new rookie, is actually doing a much better job and got a strong head on his shoulders.
Yeah, a little more measured in his approach, and it's good. Speaking of AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly P9, Yuki Tsunoda P15 down there. Whoa, that's that's tough.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
So both Pierre and Yuki boxed before the safety car. That didn't help matters, sending them down the order. Pierre did fight his way back up, though, into the field. Had some good passes on the way to haul himself up into the points. Pretty inspired drive from where he was to get back up to P9, to be honest with you. Kind of mired down there in the back. And Yuki had a tougher day, saying he lacked pace all day. The team need to understand why that is. And it was very difficult to keep up with the other cars in DRS. And that's an interesting conundrum in and of itself that I have to unpack in my head. But, quite a disparity there for AlphaTauri. This isn't kind of where I saw them finishing, but who knew?
No, didn't see them. They've been pretty handy recently. So, it's a shame.
Yeah.
But Yuki's keeping it on the road, but not really doing anything special. And Gasly's ringing that thing for dear life still.
Yeah, exactly. Williams, normally I would leave this to the end of the podcast, but not this week. Alex Albon P10, Nicholas Latifi P16, again for Nicholas Latifi.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough.
Latifi boxed early, but struggled to get the life out of his hard compounds. He said he had lots of graining, so he boxed again, and that plunged him down the order, finishing P16. But the real story is here, in the end, you could say the real story about Nicholas was...
That's strange. I wonder what's causing all the accidents.
It wasn't the accidents, but... The big story, Paul, is that Alex started on the hard compounds, made them last for 57 of the 58 laps at a race. I thought for a minute he was going to pull a Schumacher and actually box and pull into the pits, crossing the finish line, right?
Yeah, but you're not allowed to do that anymore.
No, you can't do that
I
anymore,
think they
right?
made the Schumacher rule for that.
Yeah, you kind of ruined it for everyone else. But anyway, 57 of the 58 laps, Williams pulled off a good pit stop on the last lap, put on new soft compounds. He was able to hold off Joe for P10. And let's be honest, he had a fantastic drive, setting competitive times, mind you, when he was at the sharper end of the grid. When he didn't box and he was running up, 6th, 7th in that area, he was setting pretty competitive times with the leaders at that point in time, and ends up finishing the race only about 4 seconds off the McLaren. It was just a fantastic call. Yes, it took attrition to get P10, but still a great call by the team and a terrific inspired drive by Alex.
Yeah, whether it was for 11th or 12th, it was still an inspired strategy call, getting some points out of it. Wow, that is really exciting for that team to do that. Go work as a team and work on that strategy. And Alex, work on that strategy in the car the whole race. As you say, stay competitive. Keep the tires from under you. That says a lot about his skills, and the team are starting to understand how to actually use their vehicle. Can you imagine what that pit stop was like? Okay, and how they're judging it. Should we come in the last lap? Should it be the lap before that? They're obviously judging where the traffic is, and came to the conclusion he had to just keep running till the end to actually beat Joe out of the pit exit, and that's exactly what it did. It must have been deflating for Joe, but great for Alex to get something out of it.
Well, Alex had to put in a quali lap on his in lap and his out lap to make that work,
Yeah. Can you imagine on the colder tires? Remember the temps, the blankets aren't as hot this year, so you're going out into turn one with your tires ready to go at 2 or 3 turns, and so that could have easily gone awry.
Yeah. Great job by Alex. Let's see. Now we are down to Aston Martin. Brutal weekend for this team. Lance Stroll P12, Sebastian Vettel DNF. A very tough and expensive weekend for Aston Martin. 2 crashes on Saturday and another one on Sunday. The team, it must be said, the team did a terrific job getting those cars ready for Sunday, but didn't have the performance to get into the points. Okay, it was Vettel's first weekend back in F1. Missed the first 2 races due to COVID. And he ends up crashing on Saturday. And then he had another crash on Sunday. Not exactly what you'd expect for a 4-time champ. He said, hey, the lack of race experience in this car didn't help him. And I completely understand that. But Nico Hülkenberg just drove that car with 0 experience in testing or anything else in that car for 2 races and didn't bend it twice.
Right. I think the COVID thing still it affects people. Remember when Stroll came back?
Yes.
Even when Hamilton came back.
Right.
They may think everything's perfect. I still think there's a little bit missing. And when you're driving these cars on the limit at the speeds they're going with what the precision they have to do, one little thing that isn't quite syncing up, I really think it throws you off. And I think that we've seen Vettel make mistakes. But I really think that it may have had something to do with that. I think there needs to be a bit more time to recover your brain and get it back working properly in order to be able to drive a Formula One car at that point.
Right.
Disaster for the team. as you say, financially, not just in results, but financially with the cap spend. How is this going to affect them? 3/4 of the way down the season when they've had to spend a lot of their money up right at the beginning when they really want to spend that money on development.
Yeah, brutal. And Lance, he had a tough day. 3 pit stops, got a penalty for weaving while defending from Valtteri. That left him out of the points. Absolutely a weekend to forget. The team did do a good job, so kudos to them. But the drivers, both of them, really struggled. So
a little desperation in Stroll's driving there. Obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to make something happen, and so clearly, Crack has a lot of work to do there. So
yeah,
there you go.
Berger says he doesn't have the skills. So we'll see what happens, right?
What a glowing endorsement for Gerhard about Mike Crack. It was like, with friends like that, who needs enemies, right?
Yeah.
Brutal. All right, down to Haas F1. Mick Schumacher P13, Kevin Magnussen P14. Both Haas cars were fighting all day in the midfield. Kevin started on the hard compounds, running well into the top 10. Got caught out by the safety car. That dropped him backwards into the clutches of his teammate Schumacher. I wasn't sure at the time. I was thinking, by the radio broadcast, something they were saying to Mick, good race nonetheless, is, good teammate. Kevin's a good teammate. He goes, yeah, he's a good teammate. And so I kind of got the impression that maybe Kevin let Mick go around because he was faster. But then everything I've read suggested that no, Mick, just the German, got ahead of him and had more pace. So I'm not quite sure exactly what happened. If he just clearly was faster than Kevin, got around him and won it on merit or not.
Yeah, hard to say. I mean, Kevin's not what they're fighting for. They're not fighting for points at that point.
Right.
Otherwise, Kevin would be fighting like a lion. But
right.
They both ended up making mistakes during the race that put them further back. Kevin nearly did a Sainz, and then Mick went off as well. So I think they were further back than maybe the car's capability was. They've been very handy at the beginning of the year. Do they still have that? Maybe they can't repeat that performance every race weekend that Magnussen's been doing. But anyway,
well, Mick had those close calls with Sainz coming back on the track in front of him.
Right. Yeah.
And then Yuki sort of jammed him up during the restart queue. Nearly ran into the back of Yuki on that deal. So anyway, despite the reprofiling of the circuit, Mick said there just wasn't a large amount of passing opportunities out there. So tough. All right, well, that's what we think of how they finish, but we do hand out awards on a race review podcast. The first one is Move of the Race. All right, Paul, Move of the Race. Who was it?
I got to give it to Williams for their
That's who I gave it to.
Yep, with Alex Albon. I mean, doing something, dare to be different. They did. I mean, last time we saw something like this, I think was the Sauber, and where it went the whole race except for the last lap back in the Bridgestone days when the tires were just so solid they could beat them up all day long. So it was interesting how they worked their strategy. I actually thought Magnussen might have been doing it earlier when he was going so long. I think he might go really close to the end. I wasn't even paying attention to what Albon was doing, but strategy worked, man. Got a point. Important.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's who I picked too. All right, next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
All right, Paul. Who'd you have for Donkey?
I got to give Carlos Sainz disaster of a weekend with implications that are going to reverberate. Certainly the next few races.
What happened? Yeah, that's brutal. I gave it to Vettel. That was a bad weekend. Bad weekend.
He definitely wants to forget.
Yeah,
they're like, sure. Sir, where's that next 2-year contract, fellas? We forgot to pack it.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Final word is Drive of the Race.
Get down.
Yes, all right. Drive of the Race, Paul. I think you and I are in agreement on this.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Albon.
Me too.
Yeah.
Great drive.
Yeah.
Great drive. And it would be different if he was just trundling around, there was a ton of attrition.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand there were a couple cars out. But the telltale sign for me was he was putting in competitive lap times when he was running up in 7th,
Yeah,
and
while
those were
preserving the
old
tires. Yeah.
tires while preserving those tires, right? Just a great drive from Alex. So happy for him. That was a fantastic result. So that's
really
who I'm
was.
giving it to. All right, let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
First up, Peter asks, I do have a question for you and the International. I've been fascinated by the issues of Merck and all the teams having this year. The porpoise issue, much more noticeably on them than any other team. I really feel like they should have had an answer by now, but they do not at this point. To my engineering mind and from a distance, I only see what I can. The Merc is running their zero pod design, where the rest are not. Could it be as simple as stubbornness that is going to work? Could it be the reason others can control this effect? I imagine the pods do help improve some downforce and airflow in the ground effects, or is it that they believe, being that they are at the top of the rest at the moment, when they do solve these issues, the zero pod then will, put them back at the top again. So, sort of to paraphrase Peter here, he's saying, are they just so doggedly anchored in on that zero side pod thing? Should they change it to see if it cures it?
Well, problem is, it is not that easy to change.
Yeah.
Right. How do you change the philosophy of a car you design? You spent probably a year and a half in the design room, and then say, well, that didn't work. Well, let's do something different. They can't do it. They can't do it in just with logistics, but they also probably can't do it financially.
Right. You got the cost cap.
Yeah, they can't go back to last year's car because the rules are so different. They can't use anything from there. So they've chosen a path to go down. They believed in this path. Yes, it's not ready to throw the thing on the bonfire after 3 races. They're very smart people. They may have found that they maybe didn't get all their calculations right, but I think in theory, they're still believing in their approach to the car, and that they need to solve the issues to get the package to work, not just discard the package and rip the paper up and start again. There's just no options to do that. Yeah. So they have to make it work. I'm sure they will make it work. How long it's going to take, we just don't know.
Yeah. The airflow of that car, and Peter, I'm not trying to patronize, I know you know this, but the airflow on that car starts when the air touches the front of that wing, the front wing. So where that air goes from there is designed as one, airflow unit, controlling that air all the way down the side of the car. Changing those side pods would have an impact for sure, but it may not work with the rest of the car, the front wing, the rear wing, the underfloor. It may not give them the effect, or even, they could significantly lose quite a bit of downforce from that, which they don't want to do. So the porpoising is the downforce is working. It's just stalling out, right? And somehow Ferrari have got it to when they get into the braking zone, it instantly grips up and doesn't create that issue where Mercedes is struggling. To Paul's point, it's just not easy to change a complete design philosophy of a chassis without building a whole new chassis, and a different design. And with the cost cap, that's really tough.
Certainly as extreme as their design philosophy is different from the other cars. It's one thing if their little end plates are a little different, they could switch those out. But the whole philosophy of this car is radically different. They have to go down this path through this year.
And the good news, if you're a Mercedes fan, they do feel like there's a lot of potential in that car. They've just got to figure out how to make it work. It's kind of their narrative right now. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's see. Mr. Jury asks, is it just me, or is that new graphic that shows the driver number besides the name the most useless thing ever this year? Conversely, the subtitles under the radio message are brilliant. What's caught your attention for this 2022 iteration of Liberty Media's presentation? Yeah. And I guess Paul and I were talking about this before we started recording. I don't think either of us have noticed anything about the graphics. And
which is probably a good thing, right?
It's probably a good thing, because if I was noticing it, that's probably a problem. So if it's going smoothly and I'm not registering anything in my head, like, Bottas only has 3% tire left, and he's like, he's only been on this for 8 laps. What are you talking about?
It's only the left front.
Yeah, it's only the left front. The other 3 are in the green. It's like,
Yeah.
what? Wait a minute. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm not noticing it, that's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah, because we've definitely haven't been quiet to voice our displeasure at a lot of these moves they've made with, the strategy calls, and he's got 42% chance of passing, and all these things, especially the tire life and everything was just really irritating, and wasn't based on any real true facts. And I don't know where they would have pulled those facts from, even if they were. So, because nothing's annoying me, I'm figuring it's probably safe. Yeah, that they've made some progress. Right. Yeah.
The only other thing I would say is that little graphic that shows 2 drivers compared in one specific turn, showing where they brake, off throttle, on throttle, and then who's quicker out of that turn.
Yeah.
I guess my only thought there is they're like showing Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen in turn 5 or whatever, and you look at it and think, okay, well, Lewis is currently running in 4th and Max is out of the race, or Max is running in 2nd. What I really want to know is what the leader's doing versus the guy who's following, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or if Max was running in 2nd and Lewis is down in 4th, I'm not really as concerned about that as I am who's on Max's tail, right? Or who's gaining between those real tight battles. And in this race in particular, where is Charles getting such dominant pace and clawing out a 10-second gap, right? That's what I want to see.
I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, when you go through data and race cars and you're analyzing yourself against your teammate, they're really the things you're looking at. So
well, then do it for Lewis and George.
Yeah. I just don't know where how they're extracting that information on the fly, quite honestly.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So
well,
I
it's
think it's interesting, but it's also, you can't take it as written because there's different contexts on tire life and where they're doing and where the car is built and where the car makes its speed, rather than just analyzing a corner. And you're not analyzing a driver, you're analyzing how that car's working with that driver in it, and the pluses and minuses. Cars make speed at different parts of the track. Some in the fast corners, some in the slow, some on the straight.
Right. Some in different sectors, who knows? But you're right. Different straights, different corners. You're right. Let's see. C squared 08 asks, now that we are 3 races into the season, which driver, in your opinion, is most likely to be replaced next year based on talent and performance?
Likely to be replaced.
Yes. Oh boy.
Well, I would have to say Latifi, but he's not there because of his pace to some degree. He's kind of gone downhill a little bit. He was learning, then he seemed fairly decent, and
he did.
This year he's just having a disaster.
Disaster.
Yeah. Nothing's good's come out of that.
I don't know what the contract is. I could see at risk. I could see Yuki. I could be controversial. Vettel. I would say Vettel.
Yeah.
I don't know how long his contract, if he's got another year after this one, or if this is the last year.
I thought this was the last one. They were looking to see if he was going to do it. I was hoping that he was going to be there for another 2 years. I'm not sure.
I don't know, man. He's not cheap. And you got Lance there. You could pick up. You saw what you could do with Hulkenberg. You could. I don't know. I think maybe Vettel. Yeah. If things don't turn around this year,
I don't see another 2 years. That's to say that.
I don't either. I don't either. So, if I was Lawrence, I'd probably jettison that and pick up Pierre if I could get him.
If I could get him, yeah.
If you could get him,
yeah.
It's a big if.
Yep.
So there you have it. All right. Well, that is the end of the mailbag. That's the end of the podcast. But you can tell us your opinion by going to theparcfermé.com. Share your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility, as always.
Please.
No personal attacks. Yes, I get enough of those in my email and social media. I don't need them on my own website. And if you like this podcast, go over to Apple, iTunes, give us some love, give us a good rating over there. Share it with your friends. Tell everyone you know about it. And also, I had someone email me, and they and it's it's a fair point. they're new to Formula One. They've been watching now for a year or two. They stumbled on our podcast, unfortunately, started listening to it. But we've been doing this podcast since, well, the website since 2005, the podcast since 2007. We've got over 800 episodes in aggregate of all the podcasts we've done. And the criticism, and I'm taking on board, I totally, and I appreciate you telling me this, was that, I'm paraphrasing here. Basically, we've become very comfortable in who we are and our role, but for new people, they don't quite understand all of our jokes and the sound bites and what the history is and our sayings and phrases and like Magic 8 Ball, shake, shake, shake. They don't get all that, right? So we're very comfortable in who we are because we've been doing it for so long. Yeah. And for us, every podcast to explain our inside joke and everything would patronize the hell out of the longtime listeners, which we don't want to do. So here is an open invitation. I will try one of these podcasts, Paul. You and I and Grace need to come on and just, explain who we are, what we're doing, why we've been doing this, some of the funny things that happened over all these years. Yeah, get to meet the neighbors. It's like next door app, right? And so anyway, and we do need to do that. But in the meantime, for any of you new listening to the podcast, if you have any questions, by all means, send me an email. I'm happy to answer some of these or try to explain this. You can send me an email at tpf@theparcferme.com. Feel free to send me an email, and we'll try our best to answer those. We're not trying to alienate you by any stretch of the imagination. We're not trying to be sort of high-handed and insiders club or anything like that. It's just that we've been doing it for so long. So when I say barf one, Paul instantly knows what I'm talking about. So anyway, so there you go. Send us an email. Also, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. I could not and would not do this podcast. Paul wouldn't even associate with me if it wasn't for you guys, right? And so thank you so much to our Patreon supporters. We really appreciate it and all you do. Paul, I am, it must say, absolutely elated for your win at Long Beach. It's awesome. Yeah. Good things to come. And I'm super excited. And we'll be back talking around Imola, Ferrari's home race, Paul.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it's a long season, right? Formula One, we've, like us, some of the teams have had some disasters first couple of races, and there is a chance to turn them around. And I'm hoping that's what happens with my team. We're doing everything we can. So I know that in the McLarens and the Mercedes and even the Aston Martin Formula One teams, everyone's working just as hard as everybody else to try and turn their seasons around. So interesting evolution as the season goes on.
Absolutely. And if you're new-ish to the podcast, just to reiterate, Paul is the sporting manager of the Hardy Racing Aston Martin team in IMSA, sports car racing here in America. But on our website, if you go down midway under other racing, you'll see the interviews that Paul does with several of the team members, including his dear friend Ian James. So check those out because they're terrific. If you want to learn more about that team and what they're doing and their cause at Heart of Racing, which is terrific. So check that out. And then next week, I will find Grace and we will do this all over again. Until that time, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.